the a relationship between the church and the state is a big deal. A lot of people think differently about it. Today, a lot of Baptists don't act like Baptists when they think about the issue. And I don't want to be one of those guys who just toes the party line because they're expected to. Some of you, when I talk about these guys aren't acting like Baptists, and you might not really care. A lot of people go to Baptist churches and they don't go because it's a Baptist church. They just go because it's a good place to worship the Lord, and there's friendly people, and it seems to be doing what a church is doing, and they don't really care about. Could be Assembly of God, could be Nazarene, could be Baptist, could be Free Methodist. Doesn't matter if they love God. Who cares? So I don't like being a company man, but today I hope I can get across without being a loser company man that Baptists think about religious liberty differently because of Baptist history. Not just because of Baptist history, but because of what Baptists believe the implications of the Bible are. So I'm going to be talking about what Baptists believe a lot. It doesn't mean that Baptists are the only ones who know the way. It just means that this is one of the things that Baptists have felt strongly about. So take that for what it's worth. Baptists, what's that?
What kind of Baptists? You got Saturday Baptists, you got all kinds of Baptists. You got those that dance around with the snakes in their mouths, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, Baptists, that's very funny. I think you've said that joke like 3 times, but still, Baptists are weird. The reason why Baptists are so weird is because Baptists don't have a centralized control. All Baptist churches are independent and can do what they think is best. And that is unique. Other denominations are more centrally controlled. Like the Presbyterians, there's central control. And if a church starts going crazy or a pastor starts going crazy, a bureaucracy from above the church can step in and try and make things happen or fix them. Baptist churches aren't like that. The church is sovereign and independent. It might cooperate with other churches, but Dave Lunsford, for instance, can't tell us what to do in any way, and he would never think to because he's a Baptist. So that means that Baptists have quality control issues. Baptists are weird. Baptists, you get 3 Baptists together and they may disagree about everything except the fact that only believers are truly a member of God's family. You can't be a baby and be a member of God's family. That's the only thing any Baptist will actually agree on. Everything else can be up for grabs. Handling snakes, like Ralph said, there are free will Baptists. There are Baptists that believe all kinds of crazy things, but every Baptist will always agree on the fact that you're only a member of God's family if you've made a personal profession of faith in Jesus Christ. Other Christian groups think that children have some sort of status in God's family before they make a profession of faith. Baptists say, no, you're God's family. You made a profession of faith. It's the only way you're getting a card. It's the only way you're getting membership. So Baptists are weird. How did we end up talking about that? It was Ralph's question. Ralph's question. So I think what we'll do is this. I said we're going to look at 3 passages of scripture, which are basically the passages to help us. They don't answer every question we want to answer, but they give us principles to think about. So before I just start looking at the scripture, and then we can dive into some more real world examples. Anyone have questions or want to ask anything or anything whatsoever? I don't just want to talk mindlessly, so just interrupt if you want to chat about something.
Well, I came from a North American Baptist, and they were part of a convention, so that's really different, isn't it?
There is no North America. There was a Northern Baptist Convention, which since the 50s is the American Baptist Convention. The Baptists in America split in the 1850s. A group of Baptists in the South split and formed the Southern Baptist Convention because they split over the issue of slavery. The Southern Baptists, you can guess what their opinion was about slavery. The Baptists who remained formed the Northern Baptist Convention in the early 20th century, and they changed it to the American Baptist Convention in the 50s, and that's still what their name is now. Each church, even in the Southern Baptists or the American Baptists, the churches are still independent. They cooperate at a bigger level than regular Baptists do, which is what our church is. But each church is still independent and can't be told what to do by the central body.
Well, this particular church, I was new going there, but they call themselves North American Baptists. They were German Baptists, and they money that went into the offering went to them and they disperse it as you have need to pay the pastor and other things like that. So I know that we're not like that, but this is one thing that's all I know about that particular group. And that church went under, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Baptists are really weird. I'm going to say that a lot, but they just are. And there's so many different Baptist groups because Baptists like to be independent, because Baptists don't see a hierarchy over a church. They just see churches doing their own thing and cooperating in the New Testament. But since the apostles are dead, there's no one who can claim and say, you, this church and that church and that church, I have more authority than you, so you should listen to me and do what I say. Baptists say, no. Church in Antioch did its own thing. The church in Jerusalem did its own thing. The church in Jerusalem exercised control a little bit because it was the apostolic church, but they've been dead a long time. So there's no apostolic successor. So each church is by itself, which means that there are a lot of different Baptist groups floating around, which means it'd be like a full-time job to try and categorize all the Baptist groups. The Presbyterians are easy, really top-down organization. Others, they're easy. Baptists are not. They're crazy. Baptist churches are independent. So Rick Warren's church in California, Saddleback Church, they've ordained 2 women to be pastors. And they can do that without fear of anything happening to them, even though they're a Southern Baptist church, because each church is independent. There's a whole bunch of fundamentalists in the Southern Baptists who are very angry that they've ordained 2 women pastors. Rick Warren's retiring. He's passed the mantle on to a younger man, but the church has ordained 2 women. So these fundamentalists in the Southern Baptist Convention are very angry, and they want the Southern Baptist Convention to kick Saddleback Church out of the convention because they are doing something biblically wrong, according to the fundamentalists. But still, the church can do anything it wants. And if the convention wants to kick them out, they can, but they cannot tell the church what to do. That's a Baptist thing. Each church is independent. If, like, the Presbyterians across the street cannot do that. They cannot just do something that they think is right without penalty from their hierarchy above them. So anyway, that was longer than I wanted it to be. So anyone else want to ask any questions before I dive into the 3 scripture passages, or have any thoughts about, even if just about how churches are different and denominations are different? I started talking about this in June and July when we started talking about the church, but the last 2 months we've taken off. So it's been a long time since we last chatted about this stuff. Okay.
I always tell different denominations, when we get to heaven, will I be allowed to come over to your part of heaven?
What?
Yeah, I really don't think that's I don't think that that's as big a deal as it used to be anymore. I don't think many people are as hardcore about their denomination as they were a few generations ago. The trend in the 19th century, there really wasn't much of such a thing as a non-denominational church. You belong to a particular identifiable flavor. But in the early 20th century, the landscape started shifting to a more generic kind of Bible-believing Christianity that wasn't necessarily tied to a denomination. So Moody Bible Institute, it doesn't belong to a denomination. It was maybe the first big school that wasn't tied to a denomination. All other Bible training schools, Bible colleges, seminaries, they're put on by a denomination, by the Baptists, by the Presbyterians or whatever. But Moody Bible Institute is not. It's totally independent. It was started by Moody, who was a businessman turned evangelist. And since the early 20th century, especially accelerating, past World War II, now you have all these non-denominational Christians and non-denominational churches and ministries where they don't really care so much about you baptize this way, you believe that these people are members of the new covenant, you disagree. That's sort of pushed off underneath the bed where no one can see it, and the gospel is the focus. And so now, a long time later, what you have is a lot of Christians who love the Lord and love the gospel, but don't really care very much about what kind of church they attend as long as they love the Lord, as long as everyone loves it. So you can go to a Nazarene church and then go to a Calvinist Baptist church, 10 years later when you switch churches, and you don't seem to know or care that should be big differences between the two. So denominational things, they aren't as important as they used to be. So yeah, I don't think you need to worry about someone saying that you're not allowed in one particular corner of heaven, Ralph.
I kind of thought that. I threw it in their faces to see what kind of reaction I would get, because sometimes they take off in their, Seventh-day Adventists, for example, they started getting deep into the law and Saturday and that type of thing, and almost implying that if you don't follow that you're probably not saved. And I would just say, well, when we get to heaven, can I come over to your side and visit? Throw it in their face, because I'm just being facetious, but
Yeah.
to see what kind of reaction I would get, because a lot of times they go, "Oh, I didn't mean it that way." So,
Yeah, it's difficult. Listen, I mean, it's difficult to convince people that if you love Jesus, you know who Jesus is, you trust in Jesus for salvation, in faith alone, through Christ alone, and all of that critical stuff, that you're a Christian, whether you're a Baptist, a Methodist, or a Presbyterian. But so that's true. But it's also difficult to say that there are differences in what those Christian groups believe, and they do matter. Which is why I spent July talking about June and July talking about that kind of stuff. I don't know if we remember it or not, but there was a huge difference between the Presbyterian, the Bible-believing Presbyterian, and then the Baptist, as we listened to this discussion about kids being baptized and kids being when a child becomes a Christian. It was two totally different ideas, and if you're not aware that those are huge differences, when you get beyond the generic, yes, we love Jesus, and then dive into real questions, there's huge differences in the way the Christian faith is understood. Doesn't mean Presbyterians aren't Christians. It just means that there is a difference. And Baptists think that the way we do things is the biblical way. So it's not something to just shove under the bed when your mom tells you to clean your room. It is important. Okay, well, let's look at the first passage of scripture so we can get some principles for the church and the state, and then we'll go into some good examples. I even have a movie clip to show. That's how prepared I am. So how about that? Even a movie quote. Scene. Let me see. The first one we're going to go to is, let me find the email I sent. Oh, where is it? Romans chapter 13. So I'll put this on the screen just because I can, so everyone can see it if they don't wish to turn. Okay, turn to it. Let me share my screen. Okay, Romans 13. Now, the Bible's not a cookbook where it's not an encyclopedia where we enter in our question. It's not Google where we enter our question and it answers it. The best we can do with the Bible is sometimes things are directly addressed, and that's easy. Other times they're not. So we have to take principles and then try and apply them, even though it's not exactly the situation we want. So, but these passages, I think, are very good to make a general point. And then when we think about politics today in America, then we have to try and apply some stuff, and it takes wisdom to apply it, because you can't just bring it over neatly. It's not clean sometimes. So this is what Paul says. He's wrapping up his letter to the Romans. He says in Romans 13, 1-7, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Okay. The authorities that exist have been established by God. So what's that mean?
It means he set him up.
Yeah. Joe Biden, put there by God, whether you like it or not. Donald Trump was put there by God, whether you like it or not. The British Prime Minister just resigned because she's totally incompetent, and she resigned after 44 days, and she was the shortest serving Prime Minister in the history of the British Empire, which goes back like 400 years. So, but yet, she was meant to be there. Don't bring up the Hitler example, please. I don't want to talk about it. But anyway, it just says, just a statement, that God puts governing authorities there. So consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. So did God just put people who love him in power, or does whoever happens to be in power for whatever reason, are they there because God put them there?
God put him there.
Okay, Paul's writing in a time when the government is not Christian. So think about that when you think about the politics today. Paul is saying this in a time when the government is not a Christian government. Whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. So it's a pretty strict warning. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Well, that's easy solution. Do what's right, and you'll be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it's necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. Respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. When we went through this in Sunday school, I talked a lot about the Hitler example and what if you have someone who's just pure evil? And that's a good discussion. It's just, I don't want to talk about when can you ignore government. We can do that maybe next time. All I want us to see is that whether the government loves Christ or not, the government is put there by God and you have to listen to it. Even if the government is totally doesn't agree with anything you say, because Nero didn't when Paul wrote this. And government's job is to keep order, to punish the wrongdoer. So you got to submit to them. You got to submit to the government and be a good citizen. So that's what I want us to see from this. The state and the government are not the same. I mean, the state and the government, the church and the government are not the same thing. They're different things. They're not meant to be the same thing. They're like two different bubbles, two different spheres. And the church, which is God's family's job is to be good citizens in the state where you live. That's our job. And that's what I wanted us to get from this. Is there anything else in here when you think about the church and the state that someone wants to chat about or mention? I'm getting, yeah, go ahead.
Are you there?
I'm here. What's up?
Victor Ralph. I mean, we live in a government that gives us a choice to choose our government versus where Paul was just in a government, which he accepted because they were the ones in authority, but we have a choice of picking the authority we want to follow. So as believers, it's not wrong to say, well, I don't like this particular way they're doing it, but I have a choice, so I can vote for this other way. But whoever's in power, and like you say, yeah, we're under that authority. But if they, if we see them do things wrong, I'm looking at Matthew, was it 24, and he's talking, you have to flee. I hope it's not in the wintertime. These people are going to have to flee for their lives, and it's probably because the government doesn't like them. So we're going to do probably the same thing. So we don't particularly like to be chased around and have all of our things taken away from us and treated like dirt by the government versus, say, another group. So we're going to have feelings about that. Obviously we can pray for our government, but in our country, it's different than North Korea or China or some of these other countries. So to say that I have bad feelings about what could come, and I don't particularly like the people, what they're doing in our schools to the children or some of these other things, well, I have the choice to make that vote. And so I'm not really sinning if I have a disagreement with the government that's in power now when I have a choice to choose another government.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think Paul agreed with Nero's policy either. So you couldn't vote though, so that there's always that. So yeah, of course you don't have to agree or like policies, but you do need to give government respect and obedience as a good citizen, and then vote them out. Hopefully, next, unless you live in Washington where everything will go blue anyway. But there's Romans 13. I'm going to go through the points that these passages make about this issue are pretty simple. So I'm not going to spend too much time. I just want us to get them on the table, and then we'll get into some real world stuff in a minute. But I'll go to 1 Peter chapter 2, unless someone wants to talk more about Romans 13. Okay, well, let's do this. I will go to 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 to 17. So Peter is in the middle of a beautiful section where there's a few times in Scripture where Paul and Peter list a whole bunch of types of people and explain how those people are supposed to live as Christians: husbands, wives, slaves, children. Here he's talking generically, and then he's going to start going on in the passage we're not going to read about slaves, husbands, wives. But here he's just saying generically for every believer, 1 Peter 2, verses 11 to 17. Here's some advice for whoever you are. So this will help us think about the news you watch. Think about Tucker Carlson. Think about General Michael Flynn. Think about all of the loud guys and gals. Think about Marjorie Taylor Greene. Think about all of the loud professing believers and how they talk about the government and how they talk about how the other party is evil. And think about how the Democrats do the same thing. Think about how there's a constant presentation of they're evil, they must be stopped. It's as though the other party is Satan incarnate. And then think about this passage. So this is what Peter says. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans that, though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Push your Christ-likeness out into the world so people see that you are you try your best to live a good and wholesome life. So that even if people hate you, they'll look at you, and even if they only acknowledge to themselves, they'll say, you know, she's a nice lady, or she's a good person, even though you'll never mention that to anyone else. So just present that face for the sake of the gospel. So here's the direct government part in verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. For the Lord's sake has to mean like evangelism. For the sake of God's testimony, submit yourselves to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong, to commend those who do right. No matter who it is, just whoever it is, submit to every human authority for the Lord's sake, not because you like it, not because you want to, not because you really agree with this policy. Just do it for the Lord's sake. Why? Verse 15, for it's God's will that by doing good, you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people who will use your opposition, your hatred of the government against you and impugn tar Jesus with your anger. So think about that. When you hate the government, when you say, not disagree, but you advocate rebellion against the government, you hate the government and the people in power, and you're an open Christian, they equate Christianity with your hatred, with your attitude. That's why Peter's begging us to not have that attitude. Even if we disagree, vote them out next time, but submit as good citizens. Sometimes that means that you can't vote them out. Sometimes it means you can. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. And if God says his slaves are supposed to live peaceable lives so they can be good citizens, so they can be free to get on with the business of living Christ-like lives and telling people the gospel, then that's what he wants us to do. Show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the emperor. Verse 17 sort of sums up his point. Respect everyone, love one another, fear God, honor the emperor, honor Nero. So my takeaway from this is, again, the church is not the same thing as the state. And for the sake of the gospel, we're called to submit to the state. There's times we can't. Peter taught us about that in Acts chapter 4. But generally, submit to the state for the sake of the gospel, because your anger and hatred will tar the gospel and tar Jesus if that's the face you put forward in society to the people who know you. Any other thoughts? I have one more passage. Any thoughts on that? Comments? Okay, I'm going to go to Mark 12, verses 13 to 17. This is the famous one of the fish with the coin. So this will be real familiar to anyone. In neither of these two examples are the church and the state the same. We seem to have the state over here doing its thing, allegedly, hopefully, enforcing good and wrong, good and bad. And then you have the state over here, the church over here, being told to be good citizens, honor the emperor, so you can get along with what your mission is, to spread the gospel and live Christ-like lives and have him transform us. So now we have this. This is the weakest passage because it's not really addressing what we're talking about, but the principle Jesus gives is so strong that the application is really broad. So that's what it is. Later, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we?" But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he asked. "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." They brought their coin. Oh, this isn't the one with the fish. Close enough. They brought the coin. He asked them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Jesus said to them, "Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." And they were amazed at him. There's two spheres. There's two kingdoms. One is the kingdom that's here. The other is the kingdom that God's building that's going to come. And they're not the same thing. They're different. Even the Bible gives this. I mean, that's what the Bible shows us. You have Babylon in Revelation 18, which is this, figurative image of the world system, the end result of all of our innate sin, selfishness is this city Babylon. And then God destroys it. And then what comes afterward? God's city then comes down and is established on the earth. Man's city destroyed. God's city, God's kingdom, then comes into being and comes into force on the earth. Two kingdoms. They're not the same kingdom. So this is I guess I was wrong to say it's the weakest one. It's the one that doesn't seem on the face of it like it connects best. But this passage is so strong in Mark 12:17. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. There's different lanes, different avenues there. So those are the three passages. Now I can give you the basic. I'll give the basic position, and then we'll watch a movie clip. Any thoughts, questions about the three passages or anything so far? Okay, so those three passages are a base for what I'm about to say. So I want you just to think about Scripture in general and listen to what I'm about to say. We'll just take a minute or two, but this is really the center of everything. Baptists are very different because Baptists came out of a situation where the church and the state were the same thing, and the church wanted to impose a particular way of understanding Christianity on its citizenry. And Baptists and Anabaptists come from a tradition both come out of the Protestant Reformation, where people were reading their Bibles for themselves and realizing the Catholic Church had a lot of stuff wrong, and are reestablishing what Christianity was supposed to have been. Most branches of the Protestant Reformation reformed a lot of things, but kept the idea of the government being in charge of or ruling with the church. So the Church of England is the king of England, King Charles III, is the head of the Church of England because it's like a legacy from the Protestant Reformation. There are still state churches in some countries in Western Europe, but Baptists and Anabaptists read the New Testament and they said, no, we don't see, for the passages I just read, we don't see the church being the same thing as the state. We see two totally separate organizations, two separate kingdoms. They exist in the same space, but they're not the same thing. So what that means is Baptists and Anabaptists came under a whole lot of pressure from the state. Baptists were arrested, jailed for years, murdered, drowned. There's an infamous story where Baptists in Switzerland was a huge center of Reformation truth, where the gospel was rediscovered by Protestant reformers, but they believed in a state church. And Baptists who did not believe in a state church were arrested. These Protestant reformers even drowned Baptists in rivers, and joked about how if you're so intent on how only believers need to be baptized, then how about we baptize you for one final time? And they wrap them up in chains and drown them in rivers. That carried over to America, not the wrapping in chains and drowning in rivers, but the persecution from the established state church. Colonies had their own established religions. In New England, the Congregational Church in many states was the church, and they persecuted Baptists and other Christians who didn't think the church, the colonial government, had the authority to tell them what to do. And so I say all that to say it's a Baptist thing to want to keep the state away from religion. State has nothing to do with religion, not just Christian religion, but any religion. The state has no business being involved. So I say all that to say this: there's two things that Baptists believe about, two principles that Baptists believe about the church and the state that we think the Bible teaches. The first is in order to be responsible to God, we have to make our own choice to believe in him. We have to make our own choice. It can't be made for us. It can't be pushed on us. It can't be, we can't be ordered to obey it. We can't be ordered to tithe to it. We have to be free to make, each of us make our own decision, which means we can't be compelled, forced, coerced, pushed gently with a smile to choose Jesus. We have to be free to choose him ourselves. And if we make an environment where people become Christians because they were born into it, then we're destroying people's souls, because we are making people think as they grow up that they're already Christians. We have to be free to make our own decisions. And if that's true, then that means that the state should leave religion alone. Just leave it alone. Leave everyone free to follow God, to follow Allah, to follow whomever or no one, as each person sees fit. That is a Baptist thing. That's a big reason why we have the First Amendment to the Constitution. That is a Baptist. It's like melted into Baptist DNA, or it used to be until the last generation or so in America. Is the government should keep religion out. The government can't sanction religion, can't favor one religion over another. Leave it alone so everyone can choose what they want. So there needs to be a free church and a free state. People should be free to choose their own way to the Lord, because Christianity can't be forced. In order to be responsible, men and women have to be free to make their own decisions. It can't be compelled. So those two things are the Baptist position, which Baptists should believe, because we believe the New Testament teaches that, the passages I just mentioned. Now, if none of that sounds really amazing to you, I'm going to play a movie clip. We finally got to the movie, and then maybe we can talk about some real stuff. Does anyone have any questions about any of the stuff I rambled on about before I play the clip?
No.
Okay, I'm going to play a clip from a movie. The movie is called, hold on. The movie is called Charlie Wilson's War. And what the movie's about is not important. But there is a 2-minute clip in the movie where the main character, Charlie Wilson, who's a U.S. congressman, meets with a constituent who wants him to do something for him. So I want you to watch the video and then tell me what you think. So if what I said made sense to you, everyone should be free to choose anything they want, and the state should stay out of it. The state shouldn't favor one religion over another. The state should be neutral. The state should stay out of it. If that sounds, that sounds good. Listen to this clip where things become real and tell me what you think. So let me find it.
The United States Congress. Hey, I'm going to talk to your daddy for a couple of seconds. Larry, can we get you a drink?
It's 10 o'clock in the morning.
Fair enough, I guess. Grab a seat. Now, this situation with the creche, I want to know all about it.
Well, sir, every single year since the world was young, the firehouse in Nacogdoches Township has displayed a creche. Now, the ACLU has filed suit against the township for displaying a religious symbol on public property. It's Christmas time. It's a creche. I can understand if we were in Goshton, Scarsdale, but this is East Texas, and I want to know who we're offending. Except 2 lawyers from the ACLU.
That is a terribly interesting and complicated question. Let me make this suggestion, though. There's a church about a block and a half from that firehouse, First Baptist Church in Nacogdoches. They got a beautiful rolling lawn out there in front.
No, this is a Christian country, Charlie. founded on Christian values.
Sure.
We welcome other faiths to worship as they wish, but when you can't put a nativity scene in front of a firehouse at Christmas time in Nacogdoches Township, something's gone terribly wrong.
Well, that's not really true, Larry. You could move that creche over to that church and everything's just fine.
That's not the point.
Okay. Why don't we just start back at the beginning? What can I do for you?
You can intervene in the case against the crash committee.
Intervene? How?
You appointed the judge.
I don't appoint judges. I just made a recommendation to the president.
Uh-huh. I think you and I both know what that means.
I cannot just call up a judge and tell him what to do.
Why?
Well, because it's against good laws, Gary.
Larry.
Oh, Larry. I gotta go talk to this guy out here for a second. Will you excuse me? By the way, I love Jesus Christ and his mother Mary as much as anybody. About 38 churches you could move that creche to. Everybody live.
Well, should the nativity scene be displayed at the firehouse, which is a government building, government property, or should it be moved to the church? What do you think? This is where theory clashes with tradition. Is government favoring Christianity by allowing a nativity scene to be put up on firehouse property, which is city or county property?
Well, if they allowed all different religions to put up whatever they want at the same place, they wouldn't be favoring any particular one. They would just say, in this government, whatever you want to display, if that's what they want to do, that's fine, but we're not favoring anybody. But people take it the wrong way when they see that.
But that's not what he was asking for. He said, this is a Christian nation founded on Christian values. We welcome other faiths to worship as they wish, but when you can't put up a nativity scene at a firehouse Christmas time, then something's gone terribly wrong. That's not what he was asking for. Now, it's true that it's state capitals. I don't know what the Washington does, but in the Illinois state capitol, they let anyone put up a nativity scene. They had the atheists. They put up a sign that says God's fake. They had Christian nativity. They had Jehovah's Witnesses. They had like tons of stuff around this huge, I don't even remember they had a Christmas tree. But anyway, in the rotunda thing, they had like 20 different displays from different religious groups, which is what you just said, Ralph. That's one way around it. We'll just let anyone who wants to, do it. Another way is to say, well, we ain't letting anyone. I mean, we'll just have nothing. That way, no one's going to get upset. But what do you guys think? Does anyone think that the guy was right? That the guy was right on, and that's the way it ought to be?
You talking about Tom Hanks or the other guy?
No, the other guy.
No, I've heard that when I first became a Christian, the idea that America was a Christian nation and we were built upon those principles. And I still hear that today. More and more, it's going away. That we're all the founders were horrible people, slave owners, and all this. They take away the Christian part of it. But if you look at the way the country's been established, there's a lot of biblical evidence, that's the way it was built. Even though we built it that way, but not everybody treats it that way. It seems that more and more people are trying to break away from the original documents and bring in their own ideas. So I'd have to say that right now, definitely not a Christian nation.
Right. So this is interesting. This is where this becomes really real, because there's two questions here. One is, what would God have us to do? The other question is, was America founded as a Christian nation, and how do America's Christian values still play in today? Those are two separate issues, but we make them the same issue, because Christians in Ecuador have the same issue. I mean, theoretically, they have the same issue to solve, but they don't have America's baggage, because America used to be more influenced by Christianity. Ecuador doesn't have that issue. Even if they do, it's not the same. It's not as bad. So let me show you. Let me show you this. Where'd it go? Where's the internet? Hold on. The computer has lost everything. Okay, the screen is there. I'd like to share my screen. It's right in front of me. So this is the First Amendment. And the First Amendment, I'll make it bigger in case you can't see it. The First Amendment there, it's huge. The First Amendment came about because of pressure, in part because of pressure from Baptists and other groups who said, listen, we want to be left alone. I don't want the Congregationalist government to tax me to support itself. I don't want to be taxed by a religion by a Christianity that I don't agree with. We just want to be left alone, man. Leave us alone. So that pressure from Baptists and other groups is why the First Amendment is what it is. So this is what it says. And then think about the guy in his request to Tom Hanks. Congress shall make no law, so there's two clauses here, no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The rest we don't need to worry about. But those two things, they seem like they contradict each other. You can't favor a religion, any religion, and you can't stop anyone from exercising their religion. So the First Amendment, James Madison wrote this, the First Amendment pictures a world where everyone's free to do what they want, not break laws, but I mean, you can worship whoever you want in any way you want. And the government is not in the business of saying yes, no, whatever. The government is out. That's why when you come to the nativity thing, you can do two things. And either one of them makes this work. One, you can just not allow anything. Nothing. There will be no nativity. The atheist can put up their billboard somewhere else. I mean, no one can do anything. Sorry. The other one is to say, well, anyone can put it up then. We won't turn anyone away. You know, it's free country. Anyone can, you know, if you want to worship the carpet goddess at Christmas, you can put up your scene in the Capitol Rotunda. Who cares? We welcome anyone. That way we can't be accused of being biased. So there's two ways of going about this. But this ethos, everyone needs to be left alone. The government should not do anything to establish a religion or give aid to or to promote one particular religion. That comes from the Baptist complaints, Baptist experience, Baptist understanding of the Bible. We need to be left alone so we can make our own choice. Jesus didn't coerce people. Jesus begged, Jesus asked, Jesus pleaded with people. He didn't coerce people. We can't coerce people. We can't even implicitly coerce people. We just need to leave them alone and let the Holy Spirit work on them. We need to leave them alone so they can make their own decision, because you have to choose God freely. You can't choose him because you grew up in it. You can't choose him because that's what the state of Massachusetts believes. It has to be freely chosen. So should prayer go back to public school? In Engel versus Vitale in 1962, the Supreme Court said you cannot have state-sanctioned prayer in public school. Can't do it. And ever since then, there's been it's been like not as much anymore, but especially among older Christians, there's a longing to put prayer back. But people in my generation do not care, but people who are a generation older than me remember prayer in public school, and they look back on it fondly as some important thing that was taken away, which is a big milestone in this country's march toward oblivion. And when they took prayer out of public schools, that was the beginning. And then, you know, it was in 62, so then the 60s happened. So is it wrong to have state-sanctioned prayer in public school? Lucas is going to college in rural eastern Tennessee. His history teacher, was talking about the Constitution 2 days ago, and his history teacher went on a rant about how they shouldn't have taken prayer out of public school. This is a guy who's teaching the First Amendment, and I just showed you what it said. But regardless, this is where theory and own experience and preferences sometimes clash. Should we have prayer in public schools, sanctioned prayer or not?
Well, should it be Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, or some other group versus, say, traditional Christianity?
Well, that's why they dumped it. This is the prayer. I've read the case. I'll read you what the prayer says. This is the prayer. It's a really lame prayer. So if people are looking back toward a golden era, this is something that we do. We look back and romanticize things. We look back on things and they're not as good as we remember them, you know? And this is the prayer that they prayed. The Board of Education in the Union Free School District number 9 in New Hyde Park, New York, the school district principal, the principal of the school, was responsible to have students recite this prayer in the presence of the teacher at the beginning of the day. This is the prayer. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon thee, and we beg thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. That's it. That's a prayer. That's it. What did the court say? A bunch of parents filed suit against the school district because they were Jewish or or something, or they just didn't believe in God. But especially sometimes there's another case around the same time, and some of the students were Jewish, but they're forced to recite this prayer. They don't believe in. Well, first of all, depending on how devout they are, they can't say God's name anyway. So they're being forced to do things they don't want to do. And what the court said is they said this is inconsistent with the Establishment Clause. And the Establishment Clause is the part that says no law respecting an establishment of religion. And they said, the school district wrote the prayer. The school district makes them say the prayer. It's a Christian prayer. Every student has to participate. They got no choice. This can't happen. The government, in this case, they took we're not doing anything. Like, no prayer. Pray if you want by yourself. Who cares? But no one's going to be made to recite a prayer. And ever since then, it's the U.S. Supreme Court, 1962, sanctioned prayer in public schools has been gone because of that idea. Like, we're telling someone that they have to recite a Christian prayer. We should stay out of it. It's not our business. The Constitution says it's not our business. Some people disagree, but what are your guys' thoughts? James Madison said this, talking about the First Amendment. He said, "It is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions, and may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects?" Meaning, if we favor one religion over another, then we're going to get to the point where we're favoring one kind of Christianity over another. And pretty soon we're going to be imposing Christianity on other people. But that's what a lot of the colonists came here to run away from. That's why the Pilgrims ran away. That's why the Pilgrims left. That's why a whole bunch of the New England colonists left. They wanted to be free from the Church of England and religious persecution. So we'd be eventually, generations down the road, we'd be setting up the very thing we fled from. That's why the First Amendment says, leave it alone. We're not going to get in the religion business. So,
well, I think you also do a disservice to your religion and also to God by forcing that on someone else, because they're just going to reject it. So even though you cherish it and you want to share it, mandating something like that, if you look at how God's church grows, it's very organic. You don't mandate it here. That Paul didn't go to Antioch and mandate that they start a church. You organically grow it. So it defeats also, I think, the way that God moves. Not just the separation of church and state, but
Yeah. And the reason why Baptists are so big on this isn't because of the separation of church and state. It's because they think what you just said, Aaron, that God grows his church by moving people's hearts. And they have to be free to have their own heart moved. They can't be compelled. So we need to be left alone. Everyone needs to be left alone. So the reason why I'm not saying this is easy to make work in real life, because it's not, but the end result is that I think the best principle for a Christian to have are the two principles that I mentioned. In order for someone to be responsible, he must be free to make his own decision. And so that's number one. And so number two, we need to advocate for a free church in a free state, a church that's free to believe what it wishes, in a state that leaves people free to make those choices. So if at any point you start state sanctioning one religion over another, you have a problem. And that might seem common sense, but pay attention, especially today, pay attention to some of the angry politicians today, especially the ones who claim to be Christians on the right. Listen to what they say. Listen to the things they say about taking America back for God. Listen to the things they say about Christianity in the public square. Listen to all the talk about Christian nationalism. Now, a lot of these are just buzzwords that people invent to scare one another. But listen to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's on the news all the time, and how she says she's a proud Christian nationalist and how our country's built on the Bible and we need to go back to that. And let's talk like that, and then think about what we talked about today. And I hope you see that those are two totally different ideas and understandings. Christians do not agree about this stuff. There's a brand of conservative Christians who believe that it's the church's job to establish God's kingdom here on earth. And so they feel that Christians need to take over institutions in public life and Christianize them. And it's our duty to do that. It's almost like a holy war kind of fervor. Not that they're going to kill anybody, but it's a mission. It's a mission to take over public institutions and Christianize them, because that's what we're supposed to do. I read a gentleman 2 days ago reading his book, and he's talking about how the Great Commission is the task of Christianizing the world. I mean, literally, not just getting people to believe in Jesus, but making society Christian and changing laws and doing all the things to make this a Christian society so that Jesus can come back. And that's totally different than everything I've been saying. So that's where Marjorie Taylor Greene comes from. That's where Michael Flynn comes from. I don't think they're intelligent proponents of this theory, but they're getting like this bastardized form of the theory, this watered down version of the theory. It's totally different than everything I've been saying. It's totally different than what the First Amendment says. So that's why this isn't an egghead thing to talk about. It's really real. And pay attention to your news sources. If you watch TV or watch the news, pay attention to what these people are saying. And if you watch, they're saying some pretty crazy stuff.
On the other hand, you got the government endorsing educating our kids in all kinds of strange pagan ideas, or there's more than one gender, you can be queer, you can do all these things, and that's great, and they don't have to tell the parents about it. I mean, that kind of alarms a few people too, and then as Christians, we kind of react overly and say, well, we need to put God back in the school so we don't go into that again. I mean, you can see how it goes back and forth. They push their side, well, a Christian's going to push their side, and you got a war going. But I can see what you're saying too. I understand what you're saying, that our job is to live peacefully, share our lives with others, the love of Christ, let the Holy Spirit develop Christians as He wills, not as we will. We don't twist arms and bring anybody in. We just share what we have and we live it out in front of people. But we can't go into the schools and say, well, you have to do it exactly my way. It won't work. And like you say, you're only going to create a whole lot of anxiety from other religions. And then you're back at war again. So it's kind of going up and down, back and forth. And then we get caught in the middle if we live the way you just pointed out, as just living peacefully, obey the laws, pay the taxes, do everything we're supposed to do, don't badmouth anybody, just get along, pray for our leaders, as we're told to do. And then you've got the other side that is calling them names and threatening their families and protesting in their institutions, which they also do to us. So we're kind of in the middle between the two wars. If you're living on a real Christian walk.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, this is really hard, and I don't claim to have answers. I prefer, it's easier just to talk about principles. The two principles I keep mentioning, I think, are true, but how do you make them real? There's two approaches you can take, and I think they're both wrong. One is to we must make this a Christian society, bring back some utopia from the 19th century that never really existed. And we must make this a Christian society, change all the laws and take control over institutions and make this a Christian nation. There's those people. And then there's people who think we should do nothing. The world's going to hell anyway. So we should we just need to do our thing and just leave it. Just leave it to do it. Leave the world to go down in flames because it's going there anyway. And do not get involved in politics. Don't get involved in influencing anything with Christian values. I sent a link to an article today, it's a real brief little article, but it talks about a middle ground where the church doesn't see itself as being the same as the state. It sees itself as different from the state, as like a prophetic witness to the world. You need to choose Jesus. These are Jesus's values. This is what human life is. This is what it means to be a man or a woman. You're not trying to impose Christianity on other people, but you are out there in the public square, pushing God's values and God's message together as a package and pushing it out at the world. And I know that that's really abstract, but I don't think we need to impose. I don't think we can impose Christianity on other people, and I don't think we should just hide in our bunker and just wait for Jesus to come and do nothing about a world that's runs further and further away from Christ. I don't really know what the answer is. I just know that those two principles I think are the most biblical thing we can think of when it comes to the church and the state. And I think the First Amendment, if you actually read it, encapsulates that thing. So the two principles, number one, in order to be responsible, we have to be free to make our own decisions, really free to make our own decisions about God or not. And that means we need a free church and a free state. That means Muslims should be free to build a mosque near Ground Zero if they want. And if you remember the news from a bunch of years ago, that was a huge controversy stirred up by people on the political right, that we couldn't have a mosque at Ground Zero. But the flip side of it, if you deny the mosque permission to build near Ground Zero, would you deny a church? Of course they wouldn't. But how can you do that? How can you be so hypocritical in that way? So we can't make the country Christian, because people need to choose, but we shouldn't walk away from public life as though Jesus has nothing to say about human life or male and female or our responsibility to care for people who don't have any money or things like that. So if you came tonight looking for policy solutions, I don't have any. But the principles from the Bible I can give, which is what I just said. But this is such a hard issue, and everything I've been talking about is a real polite and moderate kind of thing, which doesn't sell tickets and is really boring. Michael Flynn's more exciting: fire, brimstone, take America back. What I've been talking about is not satisfying and it's boring. So it's not as sexy. The head of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is a policy group designed in a Baptist way to push Christian values in the public square, to try and give a Christian view about legislation and things like that. The former head of that organization quit 2 years ago because of all the hatred he was getting from the fundamentalists within the Southern Baptist Convention, who was angry because he didn't support Donald Trump. Politics consumes our Christianity in this country, and politics drives our understanding of Christianity a lot. And so you have a lot of otherwise okay or good Christian teachers who are out to lunch. Jack Hibbs, totally crazy. And that may offend some of you, but the guy is untrustworthy and he's unbalanced. He's crazy about America. He doesn't claim to be a Baptist, I don't believe, so I guess I can forgive him, but he's out to lunch. Too many Christians leaders have gone insane in the last 6 years about America and Christianity in the public square. And too many Baptists don't seem to remember what it means to be a Baptist about that issue. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's what I got. Questions, thoughts, anything whatsoever?
I think it's a very fair presentation of how to actually think. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. I hope this goes without saying. It doesn't matter to me if you like President Trump or not. Those are two separate issues. I'm just saying that as a Christian who believes that if people are responsible to God, they have to be free to make their own decisions, then that means the government should stay out of religion. And if we really believe that, that means either you keep prayer at our public school, or you let the seventh graders, you make all the seventh graders get out the prayer rugs and pray toward Mecca with the Muslims. If you want to do that, if you want to be fair, like everyone can have their scenes at the rotunda at Christmas time, then you got to do that. And I guarantee you, my son's teacher in Tennessee would not want that. Why? Because he wants to favor Christianity. But if we believe what I've just been talking about, the government should stay out of it. Stay away. Pray by yourself. Pray every class if you want. Just the state's not going to force you to pray. That's all it is. So thinking about these things in the abstract's really easy, but then when you come to real life, the movie clip, school prayer, all of a sudden it can become more uncomfortable. The mosque at near Ground Zero. But the Bible, we believe, teaches government needs to stay out of it. There's two different spheres. No one, everyone's speechless. Tim, Londa, Arlene, no one has anything else to chat about?
I have spoken.
I have just one comment. I read that. I read the article that you mentioned, and I felt it gave good representation of what we've been talking about and the alternative, what we should really be doing as believers. And I think, just for an example, one of the things that has plagued some school districts, for instance, public school districts, is where an administration comes in and says children are not allowed to bring their Bibles to school, or they're not allowed to pray if they want to. And at that point, I think that's where believers can be involved in a correction, in a way to correct that thinking, because it's not. It just pops up every so often in certain areas. Somebody comes along from administration and they start regulating religion, religious freedom for the students. And this has popped up. I worked for a community college, right? Very liberal kind of place. But what I was always very happy to see was how they stood up for those students who wanted to have a Christian club. And even though there were people saying, oh, no, you're bringing, church of separation of church and state, blah, blah, blah. They said, no, it's a club. It's like any other club. They have their advisors, their leaders. They do what they want to do. It's just a club. They have the freedom to have that club. So that shut people up. And so I think in this example, this is one way that we can become somewhat involved, just to make sure things are kept on an even keel.
Yeah. So I think the First Amendment is genius, because when you think about an example like that, there's two parts. The government can't establish a religion, but it also can't prohibit free exercise. So there's two clauses. So the Christians, theoretically, the Christians should be allowed to make their own club, and some other group can make their own club too, as long as you don't. If you restrict one group from having a club and everyone else gets a club, there's a problem. So. Even when I was in high school, there was an LGBTQ club at Foss High School in Tacoma, and there was a chess club, and there was a Christian club, and there was all sorts of clubs, and it was fine because anyone can have a club. It didn't matter. So what you're saying is right, but you have some zealots who think that, well, like you just said, oh, we can't because of religion. It's not that there can't be religions, like you can't establish one. So like the nativity thing, everyone can have one if they want, or no one can have anything. That's the only way to make this work, Well, just 6 months ago, did people remember there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision about the football coach in Bremerton who I'll get some of the details wrong, but anyway, at the end of every game, he would go out to the field in full view of anyone who might be milling around. He didn't wait 3 hours later, but game's over. He would go out to the field in the middle of the field and pray in the middle of the field. And for some reason, Christianity and football are really tight. I don't know why. But anyway, he would go and pray. The school district told him he could not do that because he's an agent of the school, which is an arm of the state. And they said, listen, you're a position of authority, of leadership. You're going out there on purpose to basically to be seen and praying at the 50, in the middle of the field. You can't do that. Pray as much as you want. Just do not go out there and make a spectacle of yourself on purpose. He's on record as saying he was inspired by the movie Facing the Giants, which is a great movie. I love the movie. But to him, this was the football coach's way of taking a stand for Jesus, going out to the football field in full view of everyone and praying. The school told him not to do it. He said, you're persecuting me. And it went to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court agreed with him, which was shocking. It was shocking to a lot of, it was shocking to me. I think they should have told him no. I think that because he's an arm of the state, he's employed by the school, which is a state entity, and he's clearly doing it for the reason of attracting attention to himself. I think he shouldn't have been allowed to do it. But the Supreme Court did not agree. I haven't read the decision, but they agreed, the football coach. So interpretations are taking a bit of a different turn. So it's tough sometimes, but we need to keep having it's healthy to have conversations about this and not just knee-jerk say they're persecuting Christians. Are they really? Would you be fine? Would that football coach think it would be fine if a Muslim coach went out there and prayed Muslim prayers? What about a Wiccan who wanted to sacrifice a goat? Would they allow that? Why not? Why not? It's simpler just to say, no, no. Pray if you want. Pray quietly as your kids are celebrating their win. Pray on the drive home. Pray after the win and on the drive home. Just don't go in the middle of the field so everyone can see you and pray. So it's not a black and white answer, but it's a tension that if you care about religious liberty and freedom, that we'll think about. We'll think about as Christians, not as Americans. Christians first, Americans second. So there's always examples about this thing, this tension, and it's hard to navigate. And I was really surprised by the Supreme Court's decision about that.
Then there was Danville who prayed in his home every day, but he left the windows open so everybody could see. Everybody knew that he was praying. And he didn't try to hide it, but he did it in his home with the windows open. So he did make a spectacle. And it didn't pay off too well for him initially, but it came out better later.
Darius's advisors clearly didn't care about the First Amendment, I'll tell you that.
No.
But so as these cases come up, the Christian cake baker guy, the in Colorado, the florist in Richland, Washington, there's always these cases. And it's always religious liberty is often seized on as you're persecuting me because you're making me do this. And we're tempted to knee-jerk say, you're right, it's wrong. We're being persecuted. Christians can't be Christians today, when we should try and think biblically in the manner that I've just said. It doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not about the football coach, but at least think in these categories and say, okay, if people need to be free and the state shouldn't take any steps to sanction any one religion, to give a push toward any one religion, then what's the best thing for religious freedom that the state can do? Allow everyone? Allow none? If we allow this one, is it fair to the Jehovah's Witnesses who are football players? Is it fair to the Muslim football players? So whether you agree with me or not, those are questions that Christians should think about. And America's fortunate because we have baked into our law the First Amendment, which is literally these principles in flesh is the wrong word, but right there in stone, these two principles.